Good day, everyone. Happy New Year. We're in 2025, and this is the first episode in 2025 of the SLTD Going Over Big Time podcast. I am the Fantastic, joined again, once again by Mike, and we are here to talk about. Actually, we're here to talk about the previous year. We just wanted to go over what went on in 2024 in the world of wrestling, some of the matches and the men and women's wrestlers of the year in our opinion. So we'll get right into it. I guess we have like a top 10 for each category. So let's get into it. Mike, how do you want to start off?
All right. So I guess we'll do the top matches of the year. I put down 5 for men and 5 for women. Because I mean, we talked about it last year when we were doing this that we weren't really including the women, so we wanted to accommodate that. And yeah, so I got matches for men and women. And yeah, I guess we'll start off with the. Oh, we'll do the men first, just because it's probably going to be the longer talking points. Um, so my number 5 is a match that I saw in person, and a match that I could not keep off the list. Oh wait, nope, I'm looking at the wrong thing. Never mind. Not a match I saw in person. That's later. This is from uh, All In from this year. It's the main event: Brian Danielson versus Swerve Strickland for the AEW World Championship. So this match really, I think it solidified a lot of things for people who watch AEW. It solidified what Brian Danielson means to wrestling. It solidified that Swerve Strickland is the guy in the company to an extent, to even a further extent, because he knew that putting Brian Danielson over here was going to make everybody happy. Uh, to the point where reports came out where he insisted on tapping out when the apparently the plan was for him to pass out. He wanted to tap out just to overemphasize how good Brian Danielson is and what that means. And the emotion of this match, because of Brian Danielson's situation that we were all aware of, the story going into this match where Swerve, who was already kind of a babyface, uh, is playing up a little more heelish uh, tendencies because he's mentioning Brian's family and he's mentioning Brian's children and trying to get under the skin of Brian Danielson because he knows that that is what will fire up Brian Danielson. Because everybody was saying going into this match that we needed to see the Brian Danielson of old. We needed to see the Brian Danielson that would do whatever it took to win. The Brian Danielson that didn't care about anything but wrestling, but winning at wrestling. And we certainly got that, but we also certainly got like the emotion of him looking at his family in the front row every single time that he needed energy, every time that he felt like he was getting down, every time it felt like he was out, he looked at his family, he looked at his children, specifically his daughter, who this has all been emphasized is for her, and used that to further just the power that he needed to win this match. This match also was the start of the conclusion of the Hangman Swerve feud, because Hangman showed up here to essentially to um, make sure that Swerve did not retain, and he did play a factor into the finish. Um, but yeah, I love this match. Um, it was it was hard not to include it, but I almost included. Um, well, actually, I'll put some honorable mentions later. We'll do that at the end. But yeah, this match, love this match from start to finish. Told the story throughout, the story that needed to be told, and yeah, I think it's a rightfully on the list of matches of the year.
Well, it's funny you mentioned this match. I had this match on my list as well. I think I pegged it around number 3. This
Mm-hmm.
because my list, I forgot to mention at the start of this episode that I wanted to pick matches that sort of focused on a lot of storyline and
Mm-hmm.
lots of like story or like a significant point in a storyline or in a sort of a long running program. And I think in this case, this match really helped like establish a lot of things, right? Swerve's place in AEW, Brian's legacy in the company, and giving him that win that for a championship he didn't really ask for in the first place, but it felt like he needed to have a significant win in his run as in AEW because Danielson was only there for about 3 years or so, and you know, giving him a significant win in a place like All In was just very important in terms of establishing his legacy, or
Yep.
at least giving him like a proper send off. I mean, his last match, technically, the way he ended his career it is still kind of went on to play on a storyline. I think a lot of people might have been disappointed in the way it ended, but I think the all in sort of shot of him like holding up the AEW World Title with his family in the ring, and it was in
Yep.
London, was a good um, visual to remind us of what he contributed to the last like full time active in ring portion of his career.
Yeah, and he talked about how that moment felt so much more important because his family was there. And I think we talked about this when we reviewed this show, about how he felt like his WrestleMania 30 moment didn't feel as important because his family wasn't allowed to celebrate with him.
Hmm.
So I feel like because of that, this moment felt even more important to him. And how he's talked about in interviews after that, how it felt like one of the most important moments of his career and one of his favorite because of that fact. And you can't ask for anything better than that.
Yeah. Okay, I guess I can. I should pick a match now, and I guess coming off of this, I guess my number 5, it would be Brian's last match at AEW Wrestle Dream. Um,
Mm-hmm.
as in terms of the storyline, it continued off from All In, and then it was we might. I don't even know if we're going to talk about All Out. I don't think we're going to talk about the match at All Out because as good a competitor as Jack Perry was, he was really just a footnote in terms of just like continuing what happened with. It was more just the in-ring aftermath events that happened at All Out that led to the match at Wrestle Dream. It was booked as Brian's last match at some point. I think like we were all aware that he was going to have neck surgery in real life, and This was the beginning of when Moxley started doing the whole much more darker side to him and talking about how there needs to be a change in AEW, a a continuing storyline, which going into 2025, we are still confused and not really sure where it's leading to. But it's something we discussed in our last episode. Yeah, this match was brutal. It was rough, and I think the way it suddenly ended, I think shocked a lot of fans. But
Hmm.
um and and the way the post match kind of just broke down about how like all the guys in the back rushed to the ring to kind of just stop Brian from getting further injured. Um, I believe was this the one where Wheeler turned on him? I am trying to remember. I believe that was, yeah.
Yes, that's where this took place. Yes,
Yes, that is true. That is true. I remember that
because
because
all
it
the
was all
story.
out. All out was the one when Wheeler was being held back, and it was just like, "What's
Yeah,
happening?"
well,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
when they initially did the turn where Moxley. We hadn't seen Moxley in a while, and he was going for the belt, and that's why he knew that Darby Allin had the title shot, so he called out Darby Allin to get his title shot, which at the time didn't really make any sense. And
yeah. I
uh,
think this was the only black spot in the way this match happened was that somehow Darby Allin just lost his title spot to Moxley. And if it
yeah,
was like Darby versus Bryan, I would have been
well,
still
and this
fine with this as a
and
match of the year.
Darby was supposed to get his title shot at Grand Slam. And the
Right.
reason and Moxley's reasoning for wanting to have that match at Grand Slam was because Bryan Danielson might not be there. And then he ended up working it anyway. So that was another thing that happened that kind of just didn't make a lot of sense. But it was all to get to this point.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
and but anyway, this was a significant match in the year 2024 as it marked Bryan's last match as a full-time wrestler. We haven't seen him in AEW TV or in the ring at all since that October.
Hmm.
Um, and well, if this is the way, I mean, the match also pretty much signified the rebirth of the group that he and Moxley founded as now the what is now called the Death Riders, formerly the Blackpool Combat Club, and they've just been on a tear as of late across all elite wrestling. Um, if you from the reports, it was really Brian's sort of like vision of where the group was where the next stage of evolution was gonna be, and this is what it is.
Hmm.
What the purpose again, we're not totally sure. But it's been very fascinating to watch the way the groups kind of done things. But yeah, it all started when Brian's last match concluded. So this is for me a significant match of the year.
Yeah, and he said that well, I don't know if he said this, but it was reported that he specifically asked John Moxley to be his last match, or
Mm,
at least his last match of his full time career. I think we are well aware that whenever he is fully able to step foot in a ring again, that he is going to wrestle again. It's just not going to be as frequently. And I think we're okay with that because at some point, just getting to see Brian Danielson in a ring again is something that people would enjoy for a multitude of reasons. I mean, he's a lot of people's favorite wrestler for a reason. He's one of my favorite wrestlers because he cares about wrestling. He cares about that aspect, which is the thing that I care about more than anything. Yes, the storylines are important, but telling a story in the ring is just as important, if not more, because that's why we're here. And that's what Brian Danielson cares about.
yep.
Yeah. So I thought that this was a good match for that reason, and Brian Danielson is well aware that people were not going to like what happened after this match, but is also, I think, making it very clear that he's not going to just let that happen and then not have an answer when he's able to have an answer. Now,
Mm.
does that hurt the storyline from a long-term perspective? Possibly, because this whole Death Riders thing, as you mentioned, we have no idea what the plan is, what their actual goal is. But if Bryan Danielson was coming back for Revolution, then it would be like, oh, okay, this makes sense. But Bryan Danielson's probably not coming back until next year, or we're in 2025 now, so sometime the end of this year at best. So you can't drag this on for that long just to get Bryan Danielson to finally stop Jon Moxley. So I love Bryan Danielson. I am going to be talking about him a lot today. Be forewarned. Yeah. This match, from a storyline perspective and even from an in-ring perspective, was good. Very good. All right. So my next match on the list, my number 4, is my only WWE entry. And I presume it's probably on your list as well, because it is the best match from a storyline perspective in anything WWE related, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
It's the Hell in the Cell match between CM Punk and Drew McIntyre at Bad Blood. So this storyline, obviously, only let's talk about how we even got here, right? Seth Rollins was supposed to face CM Punk at WrestleMania 40, and that didn't happen because CM Punk got injured in his very first match back in WWE on television in the Royal Rumble.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody knew when he was going to be cleared again because the man gets hurt a lot. He's not a spring chicken anymore. He's closer to 50 than he is to 30. Or even to 40, I mean. And I think that the bloom on the rose of CM Punk being back went away when he left AEW. Yes, there was a lot of people that their CM Punk return was him coming back to WWE. And that's fine. My CM Punk return was when he came back to wrestling at all, not to WWE. So when he came back to WWE and everything that happened after AEW, it didn't feel special to me. And I still love CM Punk. Always have, probably always will. But I see him differently now. I see him as the person he wants me to see him as. Because he says it on TV a lot. I'm here for money, not for friends. And this storyline only happened really because of the Royal Rumble injury. Because Drew took great pleasure in being the person to keep CM Punk off of WrestleMania. Because he was one of those people that is not a fan of CM Punk for obvious reasons. We see it right now in the angle he's doing with Seth Rollins. A lot of people felt betrayed when he left WWE. Felt like CM Punk was claiming to be a locker room leader, claiming to be the guy that was going to be there for years to come for everybody in the locker room. Drew was one of those people who felt like CM Punk betrayed him by walking out of WWE and used that to emphasize his hatred for CM Punk and use that for every time CM Punk would show up after the injury and he was able to do things physically, CM Punk would screw Drew out of opportunities. So Drew's answer would be to hurt him. And then he would disappear again. And we would do that multiple times, at least 3, because CM Punk couldn't have matches. the biggest one being that one on SmackDown, where they were backstage and a door just opens and CM Punk is laid out, and Drew just brings him to the stage and drops him after he's been bloodied. Where the storyline took a turn for the worse, in my opinion, is when they introduced a bracelet that was legitimately given to CM Punk by a fan. Said fan acknowledged that, and every time that they would overemphasize this bracelet, that fan would tweet, I'm not going to say her name because it doesn't matter right now. But they use this to make that into something that they actually sell on WWE.com.
Okay.
And that person did not get compensation for that, by the way. But this match is the culmination of all of that. So we went from January of last year to October of last year, just on angles. And of course, we had 2 matches before this Hell in a Cell match. We had the stupid red light, green light strap match, which I hate. I hate the way they do strap matches in WWE. Absolutely hate it. And the other match that they had before that. But this match was the culmination of all of that. And they used all of that to tell a story throughout the match. I just rewatched the match because it's for free on YouTube. They put it on their YouTube. Yeah, this is one of the best Hell in a Cell matches that they've done in a long time, because they got to a point where they ruined that stipulation because they made a pay-per-view just called Hell in a Cell, and they would just have 3 random Hell in a Cell matches on each card that did not need to be a Hell in a Cell match. So they since 1997, which is when the Hell in a Cell was created, there's been over 50 of these things. And just because WWE just oversaturated the idea of the Hell in a Cell match. But yeah, everything that happens in this match, I think, is warranted on both ends. CM Punk wants to get revenge for all the times that Drew made everything that boiled up in Drew's mind into hurting CM Punk. And Drew just wants to get rid of CM Punk for being the person that he is and not caring about the business as a whole. And Drew obviously is one of those people, one of those heels that is 100% correct about the things that he's been saying. But of course, because he's a heel, he doesn't get the support that he needs to emphasize those points. And yeah, this match was brutal. This match was everything that you want in a Hell in a Cell match. It was bloody, which WWE does not do all that frequently. I think we're seeing it a lot more because of the TKO merger. And I don't know how you know, if you're under the same umbrella as UFC, I don't know how you can have a wrestling show and not have blood at some point. So, and Hell in a Cell is a perfect time to have that. Yeah, there was so much that they did in this match that looked brutal, looked painful, everything. And it ended, of course, with a spot where Drew brings in a bag of beads. Of course, every time you see a bag in a match of any kind, you think it's going to be thumbtacks or even broken glass. No, it was just a bag of beads because of the stupid bracelet. And yeah, Drew obviously goes for the Claymore and lands on the steel steps like back first. And then CM Punk, to overemphasize that he is officially done with this, wraps a chain around his leg and does a GTS and puts an end to that feud and puts an end to Drew until we saw him recently, and we discussed that return recently, as well as CM Punk going away for a while because Saudi Arabia. And yeah, this match, love it. Love this Hell in a Cell. I think you're muted. I can't hear you.
Sorry, I was gonna say, yeah. Then CM Punk shows up randomly as member of the OG Bloodline team in War Games, and since you mentioned Drew reappearing, the stuff that Drew is doing now is pretty much still a residual of association with CM Punk and to a lesser extent Roman Reigns, because he's just getting back at people who are like decided to be friends or team with those two men. So
Yep.
we'll see where 2025 goes from that.
But yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. I hope that we don't see another Hell in a Cell match for
It
a
should
long
be a
time.
once. It should be a once in a year thing, right? It's like,
Well,
we
because
can't.
when you think about it, from like the early years of Hell in a Cell, the first one was in '97. Then we did one in '98, and then like we did one in '99, but barely, and then we didn't see another one for like 2 years. So they need to do that more. Only bring back Hell in a Cell when it's warranted to bring back Hell in a Cell, and this feud was definitely that.
Yeah. Okay.
It seems like you're having camera issues.
Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna leave the studio for. Okay. This is highly regular. I'm gonna leave the studio for a second.
Mm-hmm.
You stay on, and then I'm
Sure.
gonna come back in.
Yeah, I will. I'll start talking about my next match, I guess.
Okay.
All right. So this is just me, Mike, for now. So I guess I'll talk about my number 3. And this is the match that I was talking about earlier that I mistakenly said that I was there for number 5. This one I actually was there. Number 3. It's the main event of Forbidden Door. It's Will Ospreay versus Swerve Strickland for the AEW World Championship. This is easily one of the best matches that I have ever seen in person. It's right up there. It's neck and neck. I mean, so I was in attendance for Kenny Omega versus Bryan Danielson at Grand Slam, and I'm talking about, of course, my number 3, just to catch up Alan. Swerve Strickland versus Will Ospreay at Forbidden Door of this year. And I was talking about how it's probably at the top of matches I've seen in person. And it's neck and neck with Kenny Omega and Bryan Danielson at Grand Slam. Those are probably the 2 best matches I've ever seen in person. And it's not even close. Will Ospreay and Swerve Strickland put on a classic that I think not enough people are giving credit to as what made Swerve Strickland into the main eventer that he is now. We talked about earlier how he was solidified as a main eventer with the Danielson match. I think this match made people realize that he can be a main eventer because of what this match did for both competitors. Will Ospreay at the time of this match just won the international title after only being in AEW for a couple of months. And a lot of people were saying when Will Ospreay came into AEW, oh, okay, well, obviously he has to win the world title at All In because it's in the UK. And what better way to emphasize the fact that we have probably the best wrestler in the world on our roster than making him the world champion in his home country? And Will Ospreay hears that and says, well, that's not the plan. The plan is not for me to just be world champion because you want it that way. Sure, it's going to happen eventually. So it was Will Ospreay's idea to have this match on this show so that that uh the expectation of having this match at All In goes away. And it was also Will Ospreay's idea to make sure that Swerve looked as good as a champion as he is meant to be, because Will Ospreay knew that it's time for Swerve to have that notoriety. And there's been a lot of talk this year about Will Ospreay doing a lot of jobs. I think that it was warranted every time he did one, because the person that got the win needed that win more than Will Ospreay did. Are some of those matches in question, did they even need to happen? That's arguable. But this match just did everything from a story perspective to help the characters of everybody involved. Of course, it's a classic of a wrestling match. Then you have the overarching angle that we're kind of still in the middle of, where Will Ospreay at the time is still part of the Callis family, and Don Callis, of course, wants him to use the screwdriver during the match, and Will Ospreay refuses. And this ends up being his downfall because he gets distracted from the goal because of Don Callis. And of course, this builds over time to where we are now, where he's not in the Callis family anymore and feuding with one of his closest friends, Kyle Fletcher. So, yeah, I love this match so much that I it's crazy that I got to see this in person. And when I rewatched it recently, that was the first time that I rewatched it. I had never seen it on television before. And just seeing it from that perspective made me love it even more. Being there was one thing, but seeing it fully on TV and being able to remember the things that I saw when I was there just overemphasized how good this match was. And yeah, I love it. And I love both of these guys. I can't say how lucky I feel to have seen this match in person.
Yeah, I don't disagree. It was a very solid match at that time. One of the many Will Ospreay performances that we can always like debate on which one we should have to put in a rest match of the year category, because there's just so many
Yep.
of them. It's hard to debate on that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. So you unfortunately are behind. So get to your next
Okay. Okay. I
couple of
think.
entries.
Yeah. All right. I guess number 3. I had it a bit lower, but I think my number 3, we may have picked my previous number 3. I had already mentioned it,
Well,
but
did you mention your number 4?
oh, my number 4, of course. Yeah. Okay. Okay. If that's how we can do it, that's fine. Number 4, kind of following along the lines of me thinking how significant it is in terms of building a storyline, or basically setting the stage for a company for a calendar year. I picked the six pack challenge match for the TNA World Title at Slammiversary.
Okay.
So it was Moose going in as TNA World Champion, and he was facing 5 other people: Nick Nemeth, Joe Hendry, Josh Alexander, Steve Macklin, and I think it was Frankie Kazarian. Yes, that's it. Um, I thought this match was significant because it kind of from there like branched off and into a number of different storylines. Even first of all, even he wasn't in the match, but even Mike Santana being excluded somehow was also tied into this because he would have been in the match if he had won his qualifier, but the system at the time sort of cost him that, and that kind of led to a program in the next few months down the road. I thought this was significant because usually, when you have an ingoing champion, you'd expect at least that champion to be involved in the final decision of the match, whether he lost or not. Moose lost in the middle of the match. He was eliminated, like right in the middle, so we were guaranteed to have a new champion by the time we were down to the last three people. Of course, the other significant development here was Josh Alexander turning heel. First time I've seen him like go that route. He was just always, the solid performer, longest reigning TNA World Champion, whatever. So he did all that, and I was thinking, I mean, yeah, he was going kind of stale. I was wondering like what would we do with him, and then he just did that exchange, and then suddenly he just hits Joe Henry in the package. I'm like, oh my god, what the hell are you? And then he takes out Joe Henry, which was right there at that point. Pretty much was when like the rise of Joe Henry really was started, and it just has not stopped. And we I think that was a lot of disappointment there with people not thinking Joe Henry was going to win the title there, and then subsequently, of course, he got another title shot at Bound for Glory, which I guess was strike two. So for Joe Henry, he's getting one more TNA World Title match, as far as I know, this coming month in TNA's Genesis against Nick Nemeth, who eventually was the one who walked away with the championship at that match. So just from that one TNA match at Slammiversary with the was a 6-man match for the title, it just kind of just branch off and just created a number of interesting storylines, in my opinion. Josh turning heel, Joe Henry on the ascent, even the system, the regrouping after losing the world title. Um, rightly or wrongly, however you think about this, Moose becoming X Division champion. You can always chalk that up to that as another path back to the world title. Frankie Kazarian, he may have not been successful in this match, but he subsequently won the sort of their version of Money in the Bank, the Call Your Shot Gauntlet Battle Royal. So he's still got this trophy he's still lugging around, and who knows when he's gonna like sneak in and like maybe try to steal a world title at the last minute.
As soon as Hendry wins the belt.
I think that's happening. I don't know if Frankie will be successful in that. That's still up for debate. For a Frankie Kazarian world title run would be an interesting choice to start off 2025.
And this is something that TNA likes to rehash things that they've done. They've done that before, obviously, with James Storm winning the world title, and then Bobby Roode just taking it away. On the same exact show.
Don't even have to draw back that far. Josh Alexander winning the TNA World title at Bound for Glory a few years ago, and then Moose immediately cashing in his trophy and basically making Josh historically the longest reigning and shortest reigning TNA World Champion in the company history. Yeah. So just for me, that match really just spoke to me this year. It was I mean, most of the matches I watch at TNA are kind of what I expect. I find them solidly put together, but this one really kind of like at that point, I think when Josh did his heel turn, I was like, whoa, what the heck? And then it was just cut out of nowhere. It was that, and then Moose getting pinned in the middle of the match. So that was so that really stood out to me this year. That would be my number 4.
Yeah, I like everybody in that match. I still think Moose has the worst spear in the history of wrestling, but Joe Hendry has lost a lot of momentum for me because of the losses and because nothing was really capitalized on him going to NXT.
Yeah,
which
it's
just felt like, what's the point of doing this if you're not going to use it to get him to the spot where he's supposed to be, which was he should have won the world title in this match. But
yeah, it's interesting because they subsequently had Joe show up at NXT and challenge for the NXT title at No
mhm.
Mercy. That would have been more interesting because if you had like a run in from someone else at TNA, that would have made a little more sense. But it kind of just ended cleanly, and then it just ended
Yep.
with Joe going back to NXT. And now, as far as I know, he kind of teased that he might be appearing on Raw Netflix on next Monday when they
Yeah,
debut on Netflix.
I don't know about that, but
Yeah,
um,
that was interesting. I mean, they're just
it and
jamming
it,
everything into January
it it
6th.
also feels like the TNA NXT relationship has died down a considerable amount, and now they're most likely going to lose Josh Alexander
And possibly Jordan Grace, but we'll get to her in a
and possibly Jordan Grace,
yeah.
and definitely Mike Bailey. That's happening.
So Mike
Yeah,
Bailey, I think he might be going to AEW from what I
yeah,
heard. I'm not sure, but
yes.
he's not going to
So
WWE as far as I know.
nope. All right.
All
So
right, let's move on.
So yeah, we already mentioned your number 3 because it was my number 5, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So um I guess we'll get into my number 2 then. Uh and my number 2 is a master class in technical wrestling.
Okay.
And it is the second match between Brian Danielson and Zack Sabre Jr., taking place at New Japan, The New Beginning in February. This match so they had their first match at the previous Wrestle Dream, and a lot of people love that match. I love that match. Um, and they had a great match in that one, but this match overemphasized the reason why people love these two, the technical aspect of the match. They and even Zack Sabre Jr.'s argument for when they wrestled the first time at Wrestle Dream was they were trying to find out who the best technical wrestler is, and Brian Danielson won by hitting the Psycho knee. He didn't use technical wrestling to beat him. So, in Zack Sabre's eyes, he didn't prove anything by doing that. So then they had this rematch, and it was just technical wrestling to like a master degree on both ends. They were trading strikes, trading submission holds, getting in, like there was at one point they had like a leg lock on each other, and then they were just sitting there and daring each other to slap each other, and each strike would just get harder and harder each time. Each submission would get more and more intricate. More it is one of my favorite matches because that's my favorite type of wrestling, is the technical aspect, and they just went full technical in this match. There, and say what you want about both guys, they are probably the two best technical wrestlers ever. And you could say Bret Hart, you could say Kurt Angle, you could say Eddie Guerrero. These two, for my money, are the two best technical wrestlers ever. And they prove that in every sense of the word. In this match, in every match that they have with other guys, they are the technical wrestlers in my eyes. And Zack Sabre Jr. finally getting his flowers of being the New Japan, the IWGP World Champion, just overemphasizes how much that guy rules. He finally got what he was working for his entire career, and obviously the inspiration of him and from Bryan Danielson is very evident, and that's probably why they enjoy these matches so much. And as of right now, this match was, of course, Zack Sabre Jr. getting the win, and he had gone into this match promising to win by submission. And Danielson was holding it over Zack Sabre Jr. that Zack Sabre Jr.'s never tapped out Kazuchika Okada, and Bryan Danielson did that in his first try. And it ended up being that he did not win by submission, but it ended up being a very quick pin, which Zack Sabre Jr. tends to do a lot. That plays into how his technical ability a lot. And we haven't seen, obviously, we have not seen a third, but they have to, at some point, when Bryan Danielson is able to, have that third and final encounter to truly prove who the best technical wrestler ever is. I love this match. I would recommend it to anybody. Some people who don't like technical wrestling like I do might find it boring because it's a lot of mat stuff, but I love it. That's why it's my number 2.
Well, I'm glad you picked that. It was worth talking about. Definitely,
Yeah.
technical wrestling is always need to emphasize at least one of those per year, if not more.
Yep.
I'm glad you also picked that because my number 2 is different, so we don't have to like rehash it.
Good.
My number 2 is so I picked the steel cage match at All Out between Hangman Page and Swerve.
Cool.
Similar along the lines to the whole CM Punk Drew McIntyre Hell in a Cell match. I mean, we're talking about storyline here. I want to talk about storyline. I mean, the storyline between Hangman and Swerve was just an absolute roller coaster of emotion and just complete crossing of boundaries and lines.
Of
I
course.
mean, the thing we remember all this year that kind of stemmed from like this feud is this whole weird. Let's start from the vantage point from where we are, from what I remember now. There were lingering issues between Hangman and Swerve. Obviously, they kind of died down a bit when Hangman was quote unquote suspended from AEW. He reappeared, and then let's see, Swerve, for some strange reason, was posted on AEW social media that he had managed to repurchase the family home that he grew up in and emphasize, yes, this is my first purchase of a home, and thank you to Nana for helping me facilitate all this. And it was just like, wow, that's a very interesting thing to put on the wrestling social media. It was like, why are we talking about this? Like, why are we
We all
talking about
knew
man
why.
buying his house?
We all knew why.
Yeah. At first, it didn't register to me, and then when Hangman, then when Swerve said he was gonna want to confront Hangman again, Hangman shows up on the screen and he's like, "Hey man, I'm not in the arena or the building. I'm actually at your new house." And he's like, and you're like, "Oh shit!" And I'm thinking immediately, I remember, oh yeah, Swerve one time went to Hangman's house, broke into his home, looked over his baby's crib, and stuff like that. I'm like,
Yep.
oh good lord, what could he possibly do here? Hangman did his whole spiel, and then he takes out a gasoline tank, and you're like, yeah, and Hangman proceeds to basically burn down a portion of Swerve's home, if not the whole home. Meanwhile, he's sitting on a couch propped up in front of said burning house, sitting there just sipping whatever drink he has in his hand. And this video has become so iconic, I think, in AEW lore, that the TNT YouTube channel used it as their sort of version of a Yuletide log burning in a fireplace on Christmas Day, and just had it on a live stream running loop for all of Christmas, of just Hangman sitting in front of Swerve's house, burning down in pile of
And
flames as he's
and
just
every
drinking.
once in a while he would just take a drink and it would just
Take a
do
drink.
that
It's just
over
a
and
continuous
over.
loop. But yes,
And
obviously, this is devastating to Swerve. His family home burned to the ground. He just bought it. This just intensified the feud going into this steel cage match, which was just absolutely crazy beyond just all the inclusions of steel chairs, chains, toolboxes. The most significant thing, of course, was not something that was physically harmful, but was just emotionally harmful. Hangman had in a bag a piece of charred wood from the burning house, which he
yep,
was going to use as a weapon on Swerve, just as
yep,
a reminder of like,
yep.
this is what I did to you.
There was a stabbing attempt.
A stabbing attempt, just absolute brutality at its best. And I think it just got over the line for me at one point when a syringe was brought out and Hangman used the syringe in a what appears he was trying to stab it through Swerve's face, through his
Mhm.
cheek, and through into his mouth, and it was just like, oh God, stop! Like what are we doing at this point, right? Okay, this was like, and I believe this was before plastic bags became a thing. It was in the same
Mhm.
show. We were just maybe one or two matches before away from that happening. And then this match just ended in just a thunderous head head to head shot, chair shot to the head. Hangman just wrapped a steel chair around Swerve's head, and they didn't even like. I don't think they even did the actual like in camera close up shot. They had to pan away to a far angled camera, so we didn't see it on the show if we were streaming live on pay per view. But yeah, just a brutal end to this rivalry. Hangman would go on to just not really be satisfied with that. Would just continue to be unhinged, and I think he's still pretty unhinged at this point. Swerve would return, looking obviously fine. Oh, good thing.
Yep.
Now sort of just feuding with Ricochet at this point and using toilet paper as props. I know we found that spot very funny. It's just
Mhm.
what an interesting end what an interesting cap off for 2024 for the former AEW World Champion. Going from the heights of winning the world title from Samoa Joe to having that historic match and all in with Brian to this this brutal steel cage match that really just
Yep.
crossed a couple of lines in my opinion, but
Yep.
nonetheless made my list for number two.
So my so I love all forms of wrestling, and one of those is hardcore wrestling. And I've been to GCW shows where I saw glass used, and that's just a thing that happens semi regularly there. So there isn't a lot that I could see in a wrestling ring that I um, don't have a problem with. Um, the needle is the one thing that I do not need in wrestling. um, I get why they did it because they had to top that Full Gear Texas Death Match somehow. Because that Full Gear Texas Death Match is one of the best Texas Death Matches in mainstream wrestling ever. So how can you top that? There was a hanging attempt in that match. Like, oh, I know. Let's stab people in the cheek with needles.
Yes, syringes, because you can give an image of or give people in their mind like, were these syringes sterilized? Where did they get these from? And you're like, oh Lord, what sort of diseases are they allowing to spread?
So obviously this was a very very personal feud that emphasized Hangman Page, and I've heard a lot of people say this, but I fully believe it to this point. I think that this feud solidifies Hangman as the main character in all of AEW. Because everything that has happened in AEW has been centered around this man being the face of this company. We had those 2 years where we were building to the ending of the Elite storyline where Hangman finally conquered Kenny Omega and became the world champion when he was pegged as the guy who was supposed to be their first champion. And then you go into this storyline with Swerve, with the personal aspect of that storyline, the home invasion, the everything, the burning down houses. Hangman Page is the main character of AEW. And obviously, this is not my point. I've heard it by multiple people. It just makes sense. It everything AEW is centered around this man. And even when he's not there, he is the AEW guy. And
I think you're right. They really pulled. I'm not saying they intentionally pulled the wool over our eyes when AEW first started. You know, you think of all the big names that signed on with AEW in the first place: Cody Rhodes, the Bucks, Chris Jericho, Kenny Omega. But yeah, you're right. Remember, the first match for the AEW World Title was between Chris Jericho and Hangman Page. So they had quietly put him in the background, eventually building him up to a point where, yeah, you're right. It's like the main character, and now, in a sense, he's mainstreamed himself. You know, when was the last time they put a wrestler on a TNT live stream? Just when he was doing something as part of his storyline, I just had him on there all day. It's like,
yep.
but yeah,
Yeah.
that would be my
And
number 2 of this year.
and I think it also solidified that man, even to a further extent, because we've already seen it with his matches with Mox. That man will do anything. That man will do anything, and I love that. All right, so I guess we'll go into number 1. And is it safe for me to say that we have the same number 1?
No, I mean, if you have a different number 1, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, like, remember I said that I try to emphasize like massive significant storyline
Okay,
development.
then maybe you don't have the same number 1 because everybody knows what mine is. And I've been saying it all year long since it happened, and it hasn't changed. It's from AEW Dynasty, Will Ospreay versus Bryan Danielson. So that finishes off the trifecta of Bryan Danielson on my list. And surprisingly enough, he was on my list more than Will Ospreay, for which I guess is not that surprising. But Will Ospreay versus Bryan Danielson is probably the best wrestling match I've ever watched on television, ever. I would put it in the same category as the best Okada Omega match. I would put it against anything you could name. It is without a doubt the best wrestling match in the world. It breaks the scale. It goes beyond the scale. It's everything that you want everything that you need in a good wrestling match. It tells a story. It builds. It has momentum shifts. It has technical ability. It has everything that you need in a good wrestling match. I can't say enough how this match has not only emphasized my love for both guys as probably 2 of my favorite wrestlers ever, but also emphasized like how important Will Ospreay is to AEW now. Because I mean, we talked about with Forbidden Door how he was going in as the challenger for the world title when he was not in the company for very long, just to make sure that people understood that even though, yes, I know that you see me as this guy that needs to be the world champion by All In, but I'm not that guy. I'm not going to be that guy. It's not my time. This was to emphasize that this guy is coming from New Japan and he is going to be the guy because of this match at some point. Not right away, but we know that it will happen. This match solidifies that. Will Ospreay is officially a face of AEW that is going to be for years to come. And this match is perfect. For the life of me, if you made me watch this match 10 times in a row, I could not find anything wrong with it. Not one thing. And the story that they told, where and obviously we've talked about this a lot. When they did the Tiger Driver angle, emphasizing the history of Bryan Danielson's neck issues, it was the cleanest Tiger Driver I've ever seen. To the point where it became an overarching story within the character of Will Ospreay that he used a move that is specifically not really used all that often because of the danger of it against a guy who has a history of neck issues and almost quote unquote killed him and doesn't want to use the move anymore, is shy to use the move. He doesn't want to hurt anybody until he does use it again against the biggest prick in the history of wrestling, MJF. Because MJF deserves that. That became a storyline on the side of the character of Will Ospreay. That's great storytelling. Just using the possibility of him using a move as a story element and using that with the history of Bryan Danielson, who is an absolute sicko who will take any move the cleanest way possible and make it look like it killed him and make the fans absolutely worried from no end. I love this match so much. I'm gushing about this match. I'm going to be gushing about this match for years to come until something tops it. And I don't know if anything ever will. So
yeah, my number one. I'm glad it's yours. Number one is what it is. Because I definitely picked something different.
okay, that's
And
I'm not that surprising.
No, my number one is basically I don't know if it counts as one match, but it's really two matches. It was both the night 1 and night 2 of WrestleMania 40, as we saw the culmination and end of the tribal chief Roman Reigns's 4-year, like close to 4-year long title reign as an undisputed WWE champion, one of the longest reigns in the modern era, only eclipsed by Bruno Sammartino and Hulk Hogan, as far as I know. The way this whole thing kind of concluded was, I think, a bit odd to me in my opinion. At first, it was at the Royal Rumble. Cody won the Royal Rumble for the second time in a row. Only person to match Stone Cold Steve Austin since 1997 and 1998 win. So over 20 plus years since someone else came along and did the same thing. Cody, on the way to getting another shot at Roman, he pointed at Roman at the Royal Rumble, and then for some reason he ceded the stage to The Rock, a returning Dwayne Johnson, newly appointed board member of TKO. Suddenly just took it over, and apparently we're going to get a sort of basically with a bloodline versus bloodline thing almost. It was going to be, we're going to get Rock versus Roman. Very odd. And then we got the WrestleMania press conference where, they came out and Rock attempted to explain why this is happening, and they showed this graphic of the bloodline, just how long this family tree is. This involves literally everybody, including names. I'm like, wait, I had to check back with you. Was wait, is this guy in the bloodline? I was like, oh yeah, he was married by marriage, and then I even saw Naomi in the bloodline, Nia Jax is in the bloodline, all these people, and they're just emphasizing this is historic because this is a family thing. Cody comes out and just says no, because it was after just this sort of groundswell of like, we want Cody, and like The Rock kind of just pouring more gasoline on the fire and going on Pat McAfee's show and they're Cody crybabies, they're whining and dying because they whining and crying because they're not getting what they want, and like really just like pouring more heat on this kind of like internet groundswell that just kind of developed, and then when they realized, okay, maybe we need to change up a little because we might have gone off the playbook and it backfired. So they inserted the world heavyweight champion at the time, Seth Rollins, as part of this because for whatever reason they wanted to rehash Seth versus Roman again. So what they did was night one was going to be this tag team match. You could say this was a one of the most historic tag team matches in WrestleMania history, probably dating back to WrestleMania 1, where you had Cody and Seth on one side, The Rock and Roman teaming up together on the other side. If Cody and Seth won, all the bloodline will be barred from ringside in the subsequent Cody versus Roman match for the undisputed title. But if Roman and Rock won, it was going to be bloodline rules. And I was thinking to myself, okay, pretty sure Cody's going to lose night one because they need something to like make night two more interesting. Sure enough, that happened. And then we all treated to the whole narrative of Cody's screwed now. There is no way he's going to win this. Blah, blah, blah. I think I was pretty certain of the conclusion of night two that this had to end at this point because last year, WrestleMania 39, we were also like disappointed after we went from like this to just kind of dip down. And then you would lambast over and over again. Why did they, just I don't know why they did this. And then, like why did Cody waste a year feuding with Brock Lesnar or whatever? And I'm talking about 2023. Yeah, I'm talking about 2023. And then going into
one of our better episodes, I think, in my opinion, is when we talked about this decision of having Cody win the Rumble and then just giving The Rock the title shot like it means nothing.
Right. It was just like, confusing at best.
You spent the whole entire year building up the fact that
Anyway,
building up that you need to beat Roman.
Right. And then suddenly The Rock of all people comes back in. And it was just so and let's emphasize the transformation of The Rock was actually healthy as well because we've all cheered The Rock for years. He's I remember cheering The Rock way back when. He comes back. We're all happy that he came back. It was like, oh, thank God, they brought in like an actual wrestler that understood what this product's about, and it's not just gonna just be all about him, like unlike certain people that were in charge for decades. He comes in, he does this move, and now it kind of makes it look like he's being all about himself. And then he just, instead of like, he just kind of seized on the moment and just embraced this sort of change in the character because The Rock's character had been kind of stale for a bit years. And then he just came in as his final boss guy. And I was just like, oh, okay, we're getting a bit of Hollywood Rock mixed in with like OG Rock. And now it's turned into this like just really lethal person. And then the way he was just like bloodying up Cody Rhodes and like just talking shit and just all the stuff you see on the social media because they couldn't air the stuff on TV. I was just like, wow, this is they really I don't know. So thinking at one point, I mean, it almost became like Roman was almost a background character at this point because it came off as more like The Rock was feuding with Cody. And I was thinking, this could be a thing in the coming year, next year, if we wanted to do this. But anyway, back to night two. Obviously, I'm pretty sure Cody was going over, but they were going to take us on an emotional roller coaster that was just going to. And I told you at this point, they have to do some kind of Avengers Endgame style of ending where, like, literally everybody that Roman and the Bloodline have screwed over should be just rushing in at this point. I was disappointed that they didn't include Drew McIntyre in that because obviously Drew still had issues with the Bloodline dating back to Roman, right? But yeah, everybody was involved. Jey Uso came in, Jimmy Uso came in. The brothers at that point were still feuding. Solo attempted to try to interfere, but he messed up, and then John Cena comes in, and you kind of expected a little of that.
Well, yeah,
And then
I mean, John Cena
yeah,
came in because Solo took him out.
yeah. Oh, that was stemming from a thing back at SummerSlam the prior year in 2023 before because Solo
Yeah.
beat John Cena. And then
Yep.
that was when the final boss, The Rock, came in, and you were like, oh boy, we're all screwed. Brock's going to destroy Cody here. And then suddenly the lights turn out, and the Undertaker pops up, not even in actual Undertaker outfit. It's just mean Mark Calloway. Staring daggers behind the Rock's head at the back of the Rock's head, and Rock turns around, eats a choke slam, and then the Undertaker disappears again. And I'm like, a lot of people were just like, I'm trying to piece together where the Undertaker's involvement is. The only tie-in I could find is when Brock Lesnar ended the streak, and it was Paul Heyman, who was next to Brock Lesnar at the time. But that was like 10 years ago.
That's probably the most work anybody put into thinking of what Undertaker had to do with this.
It was just like a big, absolutely everybody was involved, and just like, okay. And I think the best part out of in terms of just like popping me was when they started playing the old Shield music. I'm like, oh, come on. He's not here. This is bullshit. I know Vince McMahon only left like just about a couple months at the beginning of 2024 because of the whole allegations. And so he's no longer in charge of anything. But then it was like, there's no way AEW worked out a deal here. So it was really, they did it off camera almost. And I don't know if they just missed Seth coming in the Shield Riot gear. Because that earlier tonight, Seth not only the night before loses the tag match of Cody, but also lost the World Heavyweight title. So it was just like there's nothing, he's got nothing left to lose. So it was like maybe it's just one last thing to screw Roman over. He comes in, I think he was about to attack The Rock, but then Roman stopped him. And this was very significant for me because Cody was down, Seth was down, Roman's got the chair. And instead of keeping his eye on business, Roman could have taken out Cody, retained. This was when the first time I think the tribal chief lost his focus, right? This was the tribal chief, the head of the table. He's been on top of 4 years for absolutely being focused on just retaining and just, whether it was with like Jimmy and Jay helping him or not, but he was always so focused. And then just that one nanosecond, he just remembered 10 years ago when his brother stabbed him in the back. And there he is right there looking exactly like the way he did because he's wearing the same damn outfit instead of all the other shit that Seth freaking Rollins has been wearing lately. Roman he falls to temptation, takes a shot at Seth, cracks him in the back of the chair. That allows Cody that one moment to slip in, get the jump on Roman, crossroads him 3 times, and then finally pin Roman for the title, ending this monstrously historic title run. And finally, Cody finishing this part of the story, and now allowing him to be the face of the company and to have the title run that Cody is having right now. And then, so this was significant for me in terms of 2024 in wrestling because frankly, from this, everything else, I think like a majority of stuff that came out from WWE kind of just stemmed, like the developments of everything else that came forward stemmed from this WrestleMania 40 result, right? Roman lost the match. He's lost the title, he disappears for up to 5 months until he returned at SummerSlam. But in that time, the bloodline has been completely transformed. Jimmy's kicked out by Solo. Tama Tonga was brought in. Tonga Loa was brought in. Paul Heyman basically was held hostage by his own bloodline for a few months before he was unceremoniously removed. Jacob Fatu these guys you never thought would have come into WWE before, suddenly the doors open. You know, the bloodline thing has just Solo's completely taken over the bloodline, um, turned it into just an unrecognizable group of savages. Pardon my use of that word. Roman comes back at SummerSlam. He looks like he's just been by himself. It looks like he has to fight his own battles for the longest time. Jimmy comes back. Eventually, they reconcile with Jay. Even no matter how you think about that decision, I mean, Jay was kind of like, I mean, Jay had a pretty good 2024 himself. He won the Intercontinental title. He established himself as a singles guy. He's got everybody yeeting along. He's really coming to his own. But yeah, he doesn't mean he's not still part of the family. Everything that's transpired, the stuff with the OG bloodline, the OTC, the War Game stuff, you know, it all stemmed from that WrestleMania 40 match. And it just was just so significant in just the way things have kind of moved forward. It's just because we spent 4 years living under Roman Reigns as the champion. At first, when he broke 365 days as champion, we were like, "Oh, that's cool. Okay." But then it just kept going on, and then it was like by 2023, it was just like, Jesus Christ! I was like, "How long is it? Are they really going to make him break Hogan's record? This is insane, right?" And then finally they did it. And finally, I mean, WrestleMania 40 in terms of just the numerical significance, I was just like, okay, I think this was a good place to end, and they finally did it. What else is going to happen going forward into 2025? We are still awaiting Raw when they debut on Netflix. Roman and Solo are scheduled to have a tribal combat to determine the actual tribal chief at this point. I think they need to conclude that storyline at some point too.
And by time this comes out, that will have happened already.
Right.
So we'll see where that leads us. But yeah, I get why the significance of this match, the importance of this match, the culmination of a 4-year storyline that was part of multiple regimes of people owning this company. who knows where this storyline would have went if Vince McMahon was still involved?
Yeah, it's almost like within a close to 4-year time frame. I'm trying to remember. Roman won the title August 2020, and then that was in the middle of COVID. And then by the time he lost the title, I felt like so many things have changed. Like, yes, within WWE itself, I mean, the ownership of the company itself changed. I mean, like, so many things have like changed. I mean, I think somebody tried to do a comparison. Like, okay, when Roman won the title, what was on the Billboard Top 40 or whatever, and then by the time Roman lost the title, like so and so is now hitting the top, like the top musical artists. But then like 4 years ago, they weren't even around and stuff like that. It's just like
Chapel Roan was not a thing when Roman won the belt.
ChatGPT was not a thing when Roman won the belt, as far as I know.
I don't know. The significance of this story I get from all of that. I think and this almost made my list. It would have been my number 5. But I cannot wait till the bloodline is no longer the focus of the shows. I can't wait. I want some new overarching story. And now that Raw is going to be on Netflix, I hope that there's going to be the ability to tell more than one story on a show with significance. To tell more than one story that can be considered worth caring about.
Yeah, because Raw's going into Netflix. We really don't know what's the time restriction. It doesn't have to be just 2 hours. It could be a little over. SmackDown's confirmed to be 3 hours now. So they've added more time to the show. So there's more time added. So they don't really need to just pinpoint and focus on bloodline things all the time.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that's my ultimate, like, just put the emphasis on everything else that you're putting on this. Why isn't everything this important? Why isn't, and I feel like they've kind of done that with the women's intercontinental and US titles. They're using that to establish the undercard of the women's division, which is something they've needed to do for a long time. So
Hmm.
people like Mia Yim, Chelsea Green, Lyra Valkyria, and Dakota Kai are getting their flowers because of this. And where you probably never would have seen any of those people become world champion in the next 2 or 3 years. So, yeah, more emphasis on other stories is something that we need big time. But this storyline, of course, is the ultimate storyline of WWE in the last decade. There has not been a story like this in WWE that has mattered to this extent probably ever. Probably ever. And that is evident of the guy that was in charge forever. But yes, this match absolutely deserves to be recognized. And it being your number one, I completely get it. And I love Cody. Very happy for him. I want to know where what's next. I hope that whatever they have planned for him doesn't involve Roman Reigns.
Yeah, it was still a bit of that and bad blood this October when Cody and Roman teamed together to face Solo and Jacob Fatu. But it's
Yes.
since then they've not interacted. Cody has moved on to Kevin Owens at this point. So
Yeah. So all right. So I, like I mentioned at the top, also wanted to recognize the women this year because I feel like last year and the year before we didn't at all. And so I put down some matches as well for the women. We'll try not to spend as much time on them because we don't want to be here forever, obviously.
you
But
still want to get to like maybe wrestlers of the year also?
yeah, but we're probably gonna put that in a separate
Oh, okay.
episode. So for women's matches, uh I can confirm there's not a single WWE match on my list. Sorry. Um that's just me. I have some honorable mentions for WWE matches, but they weren't better than, in my opinion, than the matches that I picked. So the first match, number 5, is a match that I think solidified these two as part of, like, top members of the division, and also culminated a storyline that had a very questionable ending that we have been talking about. It is the Chicago Street Fight at AEW All Out between Chris Statlander and Willow Nightingale. So they built this storyline around Chris turning on Willow for taking opportunities away from her, and Willow becoming the center of attention when Chris felt like she was the center of attention. And of course, Stokely Hathaway played a big part in that, getting in the ear of Chris Statlander and never actually liking Willow and using that to get Chris to turn on Willow. And it was all culminating here in this big street fight where they finally put their differences, well, not put their differences aside, but end whatever this is and end this rivalry to where they can both go their separate ways and see who is actually the best out of the two. Chris would win this match, which rightfully so, in my opinion. I think she needed it more than Willow did. The problem is everything that happens after makes absolutely no sense. Everything
man.
that happens after makes absolutely no sense. So they spent all this, and I'm not going to harp on the storyline for too long, but because I do love the match. It's one of the best women's street fights ever. After this match takes place, Chris is just randomly a babyface and no longer managed by Stokely Hathaway. Chris, who won the match, is not going for the AEW World Title. Willow is the person who lost the match, and then out of nowhere, Chris is feuding with Mercedes because she wants to get the TBS title back because I guess she feels that that's her belt, which is fine. It's not the world title though. So she's been feuding with her, but randomly on I guess the second to last episode of Rampage ever, Chris helps Willow like during a double team, and Willow just looks at her weird, and Chris walks away, and it hasn't been acknowledged since.
So before you go on, I put this as my number 2, just because I remember just the brutality of it and just how the way it ended. As my number 2, the street fight. But yes, subsequently everything that unfolded, it's a head scratcher because even like they just kind of just removed Stokely's involvement completely at all. It's like, you did all this thing. Why wouldn't you want to stick by Statlander? But instead, you described it as like, oh, they decided to reach a business decision and part ways here. I'm like, what? Did you build her up to this monster heel role? So just why don't you just keep going on with it? But apparently not. It's just so odd.
Like I said, I don't want to spend too much time on the storyline stuff that followed because the match itself is one of the best women's street fights ever. And the story that they told throughout the match, the spots that they did, the tables, the thumbtacks, everything was amazing. And I don't think I've seen a better women's street fight in a while, and other than maybe the Britt and Thunder Rosa one from a few years ago, or even some of the tag ones that they did with Willow and Ruby against Bunny and Anna Jay. But yeah, this match absolutely ruled. So everybody, I love both girls are great in-ring workers. I am hoping for a Chris Statlander world title something in the future. I think that she is ready. I think she deserves that. We just need the right story to get there.
Okay, so my number 5, I kind of actually went outside the box a little bit here. I picked this significantly because it was one of the first times that female WWE wrestlers went over to another promotion to do sort of an interpromotional match. I picked this match I remember seeing between Io Sky versus Utami Hayashishida at Marigold Summer Destiny.
All right, well, that's my number 2.
Okay, that's good. We kind of switch places there. So yeah, it was I don't want to use just the word spot fest as a derogatory term, but it was a lot of athleticism. It was a lot of stuff that I don't recall seeing Io being able to do in a WWE setting. And it was very refreshing because I had not seen her really that much when she was on Stardom, when she was doing the Joshi when she was a Joshi wrestler back in Japan. So, and it was very good to see this. And I understand that Utami is like sort of one of the women they're building this new promotion Marigold around now that Julia has departed. So I believe Io won this match as far as I recall, but that's the way I don't, the fact I don't remember, I just remembered how much of the athleticism and the back and forth exchanges were in this match. And yeah, so I thought this was a good number 5 to plug in there.
Yeah, and just to add, there's actually some story significance to this match as well, because so Utami took over in Stardom when Io Sky was there as Io Shirai, being like probably one of their best wrestlers ever. Um, she started a group called Queen's Quest, and when she left to go to WWE, Utami took over as the leader of that group. And these two had never met in a ring. Utami actually considered Io one of her idols in wrestling, and this was a dream match for Utami to have. So that's why when they started promoting this match as the Queen of Queen match, that's why. Because you have the two queens of Queen's Quest going at it. Queen's Quest is no longer a group, I believe, but um, yeah, you had the two, and Utami is probably one of the best young wrestlers in the world right now on the women's side. She's only 26 years old and is having classics already. She was having classics in Stardom, but this match being a dream match of hers, the significance of both of them being the leaders of Queen's Quest at some point, but never actually meeting. So this match had a lot of and yeah, it's one of the best women's matches I've ever seen. I I love this match. That's why it's my number two. So yeah, I love that you have it on your list. So yeah. All right, so we'll get to my number four, and we're sticking with Japanese wrestling here, and this is uh this is one of the matches I think that solidified women's wrestling for me in 2024. Um, so one of the other faces of Stardom is Mayu Iwatani. She is the reigning IWGP Women's Champion, winning it from Mercedes and holding it ever since. And one of the first matches that she had this past year was on January 4th at Stardom Gate, where she took on Shuri for that championship. Now, um, Iwatani and Shuri have had matches before, but this one just hit different. Mayu Iwatani is considered probably the MVP of Stardom. She is one of the best women's wrestlers in the world, and she might not be on people's lists this year of like top wrestlers because she didn't wrestle a ton of matches. She didn't wrestle like a lot of singles matches. She was in a lot of tag matches or when she was defending this belt. But this match, if you go back and watch it, I highly recommend that people do go back and watch it because so Shuri is a former MMA competitor who emphasizes a lot of striking in her offense, and they just had a hell of a match here. I rewatched it again recently to talk about it here, and yeah, I highly recommend that people go back and watch this match from January of last year. Um, if you don't know too much about Mai Watani, it's a good match to watch to get to know her style. She does a lot of flashy stuff here and there. One of her newest, she started doing it like end of 2023, but most of 2024, where she does like a reverse Frankenstein, a super Frankensteiner, and she finishes matches with it, and I love it. But yeah, I think that this type of match, people should go out of their way to see it, to see, and I don't think women's Japanese wrestling gets enough eyes on it. I mean, we've talked about this in the past when we had Ella J on, and even before that, about like Japanese wrestling's influence on women's wrestling and how it plays a big role in women's wrestling in America being more technical. And because in Japan, it's just about the wrestling. And like, yes, they do put in a lot to their looks and stuff, but the wrestling is the thing. The wrestling is the thing that people that are there for. That's why Stardom exists. That's why Marigold exists. So I highly recommend this match because I think it's a good starting point for people to get into Japanese wrestling and Japanese Joshi wrestling.
Cool. So my number 4 is I know you didn't put a WWE match in here, but I did. I just thought this one was a pretty solid performance, and it was for me just a good first impression of like some of these new players that have emerged on NXT.
Mm-hmm.
It is the Women's Iron Survivor Challenge at NXT Deadline between Julia, Stephanie Fakir, Sol Ruka, Ren St. Clair, and Zarya, formerly known as Delta.
Mm-hmm.
I guess Ren St. Clair would have been the sort of outlier in this on paper, but I guess I don't know. Maybe she just earned this match by just the power of positive thinking because she just managed to win a qualifier sort of by accident. No, she got eliminated first, and then she won the second chance, sort of last chance entry spot. So, like for people who lost their qualifiers, as like a second chance, got thrown into a fatal 4-way, won that. So you're facing down 3 of the top signees this year: Julia, Stephanie Fakir, and Zarya. So Ruka, who I see as a very solid up and comer within the current NXT environment. She does moves that are like really innovative. I had never seen Randy. I never thought I would see a cutter redefined by her the way she does it. And so and Ren St. Clair, I saw her briefly when she was under another name on NWA, but yeah, she really has come into her own since like coming onto NXT and just being part of this this no quarter catch crew group with like Charlie Dempsey and these other guys, and they've really just helped pretty much sort of enhanced her character, sort of just got all these tough shooter kind of guys, and then suddenly you've got this sort of peppy kind of girl that kind of gives me Kylie Ray vibes, but can also be like crazy. So I thought it was very interesting as a character. So for her to be thrown in this match with who I see as just future NXT champions or champions down the road if they move on to the sort of the main WWE programming is very good as a something for her career. But I just thought this match was very interesting. I think at one point Ren was just pinned by every single other 4 of the other women, so she kept getting thrown into the penalty box, as you will. If I just had to explain the Iron Survivor Challenge, if you haven't watched it, it's basically 2 people will start the match, and then about every 90 seconds, another person will enter the match. But this match only lasts 25 minutes, so there's no like overtime. It's only 25 minutes. Whoever gets the most pinfalls within the 25 minutes is the winner. So whoever won this match will face Roxanne Perez for the NXT Women's title. I just thought it was funny that Ren went through the whole thing and got pinned by like every single other woman and just kept getting thrown in the penalty box. And then finally, I think she did get a pin, so she ended up like tying with everybody else. And yeah, just the way the fluidity of the match is going on, and just everybody managing to get into signature moves. And I mean, Julia winning was, I think, expected, and I feel like this is where the beginning of like Julia being the next NXT Women's Champion will begin in 2025 when she faces Roxanne at New Year's Evil. Because at this point, Roxanne, and we'll probably talk about this later, has really become one of the women in NXT because she's had this title since last April. So really become like the women to beat. I mean, she's beaten everybody as far as I know. So I think we've seen the end. Like, there's nobody really left at this point. But I thought this was a pretty good match in terms of a women's match. If I had to pick one, it's on my number 4, so not that high up. I'm not saying it was the best. You know, this is a very new concept that Shawn Michaels created under his directorship of NXT. It's really sort of a he kind of just spliced together sort of stipulation matches from other places and just kind of made his own thing. I mean, I see this. So I mean, they had to find something to replace War Games because War Games was taken over on put onto Survivor Series, right? So,
Yeah.
overall, Mike, I don't expect if you want to say anything or not about this, but I just thought it was a good women's match that I wanted to recognize overall today.
I will say that I think everybody in this match has very bright futures in WWE. Everybody in this match are good workers. And everybody in this match, I think, know how to put on a good match. I'm excited to see Julia get that opportunity because I love Julia. I love Stephanie Vaquer. Sol Ruka's gonna be a star. Ren Sinclair probably going to be like along the lines of like a Dakota Kai in the future. And yeah, Zarya is going to be a champion also. So all of these women are great. So
Yeah, I thought this was great that this women's Iron Survivor highlighted the strengths of each of these women and going forward where their careers will go. I mean, I'm not saying the men's Iron Survivor challenge was bad, but the fact that they just threw in Oba Femi as like a surprise entrant, it kind of almost gave away the ending at that point because it was it didn't really like once he was in there, I was just like, oh man, okay, I think pretty sure they're just gonna make him win instead. So yeah,
yeah,
but yeah, I want to recognize that women's Iron Survivor match.
I will say I mean, I don't watch NXT semi regularly, but I do watch it when there's good stuff going on with those women, specifically Julia, Zarya, and Stephanie Vaquer. They are probably the sole reason why I would watch NXT at all. The women's division in NXT is probably better than most women's divisions in wrestling. I mean, I would put it next to AEW's because AEW's is so good now. All right, so we will go right into my number 3, which is another starter match and another Mayu Iwatani match. The last one. This one took place at All Star Queendom against Saray. So WWE fans will be aware of Saray, obviously. She was in NXT for a little while, and unfortunately, her time there was not very good. She, I don't know if she was getting hurt or if they just didn't know what they were doing with her. They started doing this character when she was there of like that she had like the schoolgirl persona, but when it was time to wrestle, she became Saray the wrestler kind of thing. They even like put that in the video game, which was crazy. But Saray is an amazing wrestler who actually had a great match at that same show with Mayu and Utami against Julia. And that was one of Julia's last matches in Japan. But this match was another IWGP Women's Championship match with Iwatani. And it's another match that I think people need to go out of their way to see. It's one of the... Saray has been at the top of everybody's lists this year of like one of the best women's wrestlers in the world. She's finally like because people thought that she was going to get the Asuka run in WWE, and that just didn't happen, which was so unfortunate for her. but she has gone out of her way in Marigold and in all over the world to show that she is one of the best women's wrestlers in the world. And she did it again in this match with Iwatani, who, of course, Iwatani ended up winning because I don't know if they actually have a direction for the IWGP Women's Championship. But uh yeah, I highly recommend going in and watching this match as well. Again, another Iwatani like classic match. She had so there's three specific matches that Iwatani had this past year. The two that I mentioned, and then the one with Momo Watanabe, which is not on my list, but those all three of those matches are perfect examples of what Joshi wrestling is, how good it can be, how good Mayu Iwatani is as a wrestler. That's why she's considered the face of Stardom. Um, yeah, I highly recommend it if you want to see just great women's wrestling. I I understand that there's not a lot of story elements to the last couple of matches that I mentioned, just because for me those two matches are specifically on my list for the wrestling. And yeah, I highly recommend them. I highly recommend Saray matches of any really. Um and yeah, go out of your way to watch this match in particular because it's great.
Yeah, glad you brought up the another match from Stardom. I think we really need to highlight some of these matches we don't get to see mostly on mainstream or the mainstream wrestling circuit, I guess. The the number three match I picked was actually is a TNA match. It's the match for the TNA Knockouts Championship at Bound for Glory this year between Jordan Grace and Masha Slamovich.
Great match.
In terms of the story, a little bit confusing going into it. Although I understand the sort of relationship between Masha and Jordan, they are friends, real life, and as far as I understand. But the significance, of course, is because Jordan has been TNA Knockouts champion since the beginning of this year, and it looked like she was just sort of on this unstoppable streak, going as so far as being on NXT this year and challenging Roxanne for the NXT Women's title. And so once you get a whiff of that, it's either two things: either they were gonna try to make a sort of TNA NXT relationship work, or they are very interested in when Jordan's contract expires. And I think based on the way things are unfolding, they're definitely more interested in the latter. So at some point, I was thinking, okay, she's gonna have to drop the TNA Knockouts title, and I thought it was much more appropriate that it was Masha because Masha has been with TNA for quite a number of years, and you would have thought she would have won the TNA Knockouts title by now. She had not up to this until this year. She had been in a tag team with Killer Kelly for a while, winning the Knockouts tag team titles, and then sort of being a adjacent ally of the System faction before that kind of just fizzled out. And then they did this thing strangely where it was like Jordan is getting these weird pictures of her eyes being crossed out again, and Masha was doing this thing, and then I can't even describe what the reasoning behind what Masha said she was doing this again was. And oh, by the way, she just suddenly started speaking English when she was booked to speak Russian since she started on TNA, which they never really got into. But once this match happened, I watched it again earlier this morning, at least some of the highlights, just impactful stuff back and forth. There are, I think, a very few women that could match Jordan physically in the ring. The only other women I can foresee down the road would be like Azaria or even either Raquel Rodriguez to Lesnar say, but definitely Rhea Ripley. And maybe Jade Cargill if maybe Jade gets a little more training under her resume. But yes, Masha gave it to Jordan like a lot. Like they started hot. They hit each other with kicks and back and forth. There was a lot of power moves being done. Um, but I think in the end, Masha walked away with the win, and it was like I think the first pin Jordan took this year in TNA. I mean, I think she might have been pinned before, but it was like the one of the most significant pins that she ate this year. But I was like, yeah, this was in terms of storyline. Yeah, this was obviously the TNA is moving on from Jordan Grace. She did a lot for the division. She's a 3-time knockouts women's champion. She's had some of the greatest matches with probably some of the greatest that come forward. Mickey James, Deonna Purrazzo. Um, and rightly or wrongly, how you feel about this? She might be capping off her TNA run with a match against Tessa Blanchard. We'll leave that where it may be. Hasn't even happened yet. We'll see what happens with that. But yeah, I thought this match in October 2024, where Jordan kind of just basically passed the torch onto Masha, was very significant. I thought it was a solid match, and I think it deserves mentioning.
Yeah, I love that match. It was going to be one of my honorable mentions. But yeah, I've always liked Masha Slamovich since the first time I saw her at an indie show. Jordan Grace has always been a great worker. She's just gotten to another level since she's gotten in this amazing shape that she's in. Yeah, I can't say enough about how good both of these girls are. And I think Masha Slamovich is going to be one of the biggest stars in wrestling in the years to come. Because she has everything. She has all the tools to be a mainstream person, and we've seen she's been a mainstay in GCW, and she's killed it there. And she's also been on the sister show JCW, and she became their world champion. Masha is great. I think anybody should go out of her way to see her matches. But yeah, I am excited for the future. Well, for what the future holds for Jordan Grace. It's very obvious to a lot of people that she's WWE bound. We all pretty much are aware of that. And eventually we're going to get that one-on-one match with Rhea Ripley, and it's going to shatter dimensions. It's going to be great. So yeah, so you already mentioned my number 2. So
yeah, and my number 5 was and we kind of just canceled each other out, right?
All right, so
did we?
So
I don't remember. Yeah.
So
my number 2 was mentioned already.
Okay, so then I'll just go into number 1 since you already mentioned my.
That is true.
Since you already mentioned my number 2, my number 1 is a match that happened semi recently, and I told you to watch. Did you watch it?
Shit, I didn't. I'm pretty sure I didn't. But if you want to mention it now,
okay,
go ahead.
So
I might be able to
my number 1 is from New Japan Strong's Strong Style Evolved show. The main event of that show was Mercedes Moné defending the Strong Women's Championship against Hazuki. This match came out of nowhere, being probably one of the best women's matches I've ever seen. And that's a fact. Mercedes Moné is really good at this. And people, I mean, her haters don't want you to know that. But if you watch the passion she has for wrestling as a whole, and she puts that in the ring, And whenever she gets emotional during her matches, that you know that means she loved how much that match went. And this was another one of those moments. She absolutely kills it here with Hazuki. And Hazuki is one of those people in stardom who has had opportunities to be like in a top spot and hasn't been able to get there. And this was another one of those instances where they haven't really clarified what like the significance of being New Japan's strong champion is. I guess it's like the equivalent of being the world champion, but for America. I I don't know, for North America, I guess, because Gabe Kidd is the strong champion on the men's side, but it doesn't seem to really matter. Um, but Mercedes has been carrying so that belt was specifically created for Mercedes. And then, of course, she unfortunately had that injury against Willow, where Willow ended up winning because they called a curveball. And then she wins it from Stephanie Vicaire at Forbidden Door.
Yep.
And now she's just been on a tear with this belt. And every single time she's in a New Japan show, no matter how big, no matter how little, you can tell she's having a blast in there. You can tell she's enjoying this as a whole because she's just enjoying wrestling. And this match is one of I can't emphasize this enough, one of the best women's matches I've ever seen. I think anybody should go out of their way to watch this match. There was emotion throughout this match. There was back and forth action. There was striking. There was everything that you want in a wrestling match. And I don't think anybody saw this match on paper as the main event of a New Japan Strong show as coming out and being one of the best women's matches to happen all year. And the fact that it happened in December is crazy. That it immediately shot to my number one because Utami versus Io was my number one before this match happened. And yeah, I highly recommend everybody watch this match just to see the genius of Mercedes as a wrestler and how she can just flip her character during matches and then use that to emphasize everything that she does. And it's great. This match absolutely rules. Yeah, I love it. And honestly, I had a hard time not putting the Mercedes Chris Statlander match that just happened on my list because I had already finished my list and I didn't want to change it again. So so some flowers to that match, Chris Statlander versus Mercedes at World's End. But yeah, love this match with Hazuki. That's my number one.
So my number one, and I don't think the wrestling at the end of the day really did it for me as why I put it as my number one. I just put it as a number one as the culmination of a storyline. It is the AEW Women's World Title match at All In between Timeless Tony Storm against Mariah May. And I think really things had picked up much earlier at the conclusion of the Owen Hart tournament when Mariah May won the women's side and then proceeded to just beat the shit out of Tony Storm with her heel of her shoe. Mm-hmm. And just gave us that iconic look where she's just looking sexily covered in blood. Just completely revealing that she was just like planning this all along. And then and then at that point, basically, Tony had disappeared for a few weeks and then reappeared, and which culminated in this match at All in London. Um, crazy. Mariah was just crazy in this match. Her mother was at ringside supporting her because it was in London. Mariah
Mm-hmm.
proceeds to slap her own mother in the face. um, that was crazy. And then I am. I don't. I try and remember. I think Luther was by Tony Storm's ringside at side at this point, but he was like removed or just attacked by Mariah as well.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, the match ended. I think Tony Storm's lengthy championship reign here, because Tony Storm had won the title back in like full gear of 2023, as far as I recall, or was it earlier? I can't. Sorry, I'm really have trouble remembering. But
Yeah,
I
I'm
thought
blanking
this
on that
was
as well.
yeah, I am. But I just thought this was significant. Not, I mean, almost to a parallel level to the way Bryan won the title, AEW World Title on the same night. Not so much because Mariah was coming in as the heel, of course. But nevertheless, it was a big significant win for her in her hometown. And I think, she has been solidly defining the AEW women's division during her championship run. Um, I mean, in terms of storyline, significant shift in Tony Storm's character, or the way, if you want to think it like that, she's the timeless Tony Storm stuff was still kind of this existing on the periphery. She was doing like showing up in like Joshi promotions, or like maybe some of the Mexican promotions before just completely disappearing.
Yep.
And then suddenly, a few weeks ago, she just reappeared as normal rocker Tony Storm that we all knew before, apparently completely forgetting the time she was timeless
Yes.
Tony Storm and a 3-time AEW Women's World Champion. It's almost like she completely reset herself,
Yep.
like rebooted herself, and it's like she has no memory of her time being on AEW, as though she just thinks this is her first few weeks on the company. So she's going
Yeah.
through this phase where she's just rehab. Anyway, that's almost a minor development this past year, and I mean this past year, because it only just recently happened while we were still in the last few weeks of 2024. But yeah, the real significance was Mariah May becoming AEW Women's World Champion. We had seen this kind of thing happen ever since Mariah May debuted on AEW, and it finally happened at All in London in 2024. And I think it was very significant in terms of the direction the women's division has gone through. Just recently, Mariah May beat Thunder Rosa at World's End in a Tijuana street fight, which is
Yep.
supposed to be, I think, Thunder Rosa's match, and then she went over. So there is a lot of investment that the company has put into Mariah May at this point.
Well, and think about how this whole storyline of her getting the belt started when Mariah came into the company, because first day she was like, "Oh, I would love to meet Tony Storm. Could you introduce me to her?"
Hmm.
And it went from there. It was a storyline that built from November to the following year at All In. It was long-term storytelling that was done perfectly. And I think recently it's been about Mariah getting solidifying her reign and having these other matches with the likes of Thunder Rosa and Anna Jay. And I think that obviously we're gonna go back here, probably for the Australia show. And I don't know, does Tony win the belt back? Very possible. What is the end game? Are we gonna find out this amnesia stuff was a ruse all along? And so my pitch was for Tony Storm is doing this amnesia angle where she doesn't remember anything that has happened in her AEW run at all. She doesn't even remember her friendship with Deonna Purrazzo. My theory is that that is going to eventually, Mariah can't do anything. Mariah hasn't been acknowledging Toni Storm since she came back, but eventually she's going to have to. And it's going to drive her crazy that Toni doesn't remember any of it. And it's going to drive her crazy that Toni doesn't remember her turning on her and the causing her to feel the way that it made her feel when she turned on her, because Toni didn't have a lot of friends and it took a long time for her to care about Mariah. And when she finally really did, she turned on her. And eventually, Mariah's just going to go completely crazy over that fact that you're not acknowledging what I did to you. And when the time is right, Toni Storm is going to reveal that this amnesia thing was all a ruse to get Mariah to that point, to make her vulnerable, to go to the Australia show and beat her.
That's the most logical thing I think that's come out of this explanation. And I think, if that's happening, then we're all the better for it. But yeah, I just wanted to recognize Mariah May's win in 2024. Felt it had to be done.
Yep.
And it was good.
I love that Mariah is getting this recognition in general in wrestling, because she came into wrestling very recently before coming to AEW. She was only in wrestling for 9 months before she came to AEW and Stardom, and was having good matches at the end of her Stardom run. She had a good singles match with Julia in Stardom. And then she came here, and I mean, I knew she was going to kill it because I knew how good she was already. And she's been killing ever since winning the belt. Her character work's been on another level. And her matches have been getting better and better. So I think the only way to fully culminate this story to a conclusive end is for Toni to go to Australia and beat her. So I hope that happens, and we'll see how that all plays out. But yeah, this was the match that fell off of my list because of Mercedes versus Suzuki. This would have been my number 5 because of everything that you mentioned, the storyline, the build, it was all great. So love this match. As far as so there was a lot of, we talked about how there was a lot of Will Ospreay matches over the year, and I couldn't just make my list all Will Ospreay matches. So just some honorable mentions of some other matches of his that are absolutely amazing that I highly recommend. His AEW debut match at Revolution against Takeshita. It wasn't his debut in AEW as a whole. It was his debut as on the roster. His match against Takeshita, absolutely amazing. His match with Michael Oku in his last match in Rev Pro is probably one of his best matches of the year as well. I didn't include it just because of the significance of the matches that I did include. Michael Oku match was great, and it told a story of their history and all of that. So go out of your way to see that match if you haven't at Rev Pro High Stakes. Cody Rhodes versus AJ Styles at Backlash. Probably, from a wrestling standpoint, the best WWE wrestling match. Then there's Ospreay versus MJF at AEW Dynamite 250. The match that almost went a whole hour, and then MJF just pulled it out of nowhere. With
that's a good one. That's a good honorable mention.
3 seconds to go, just pulls it out of nowhere. Easily one of MJF's best TV matches of all time. MJF obviously has had a ton of great matches in the past, and it was unfortunate that he missed most of this year due to injury. But that match, absolutely just a classic TV match that went a whole hour, 59 minutes and 57 seconds. Um, on the women's side, Bailey versus Naomi versus Tiffany at Backlash. One of the better women's wrestling matches in WWE. Backlash seemed to be the wrestling pay per view. The another match that I think goes unnoticed from Rev Pro a lot was Alex Windsor versus Danny Luna. That match absolutely killed it. I don't watch Rev Pro a whole lot, but when matches are brought up online and they say how good they are, I have to check them out. This was one of those. And Alex Windsor is a very good wrestler who I recommend people go out of their way to see. People will probably recognize Danny Luna from TNA. But yeah, I think Alex Windsor is going to have people looking to get her in the future. Just so happens that she is the wife or girlfriend of Will Ospreay, so I guess it's not surprising that she's an amazing wrestler.
Yeah. I have one honorable mention now that I remember I have it on the list, but I couldn't slot it into a number. That was at Revolution this past year. I guess it was the main event. It was Sting and
Oh
Darby
yeah,
Allin versus
that's a
the
good
Young
one.
Bucks for the AEW Tag Team titles. Sting's retirement match. You know, we're talking about We're talking about Brian's retirement this year. It was Sting's retirement match. You would have thought that the Young Bucks would have gone over as a way to just sort of end the Sting's career, but no, they retained the titles. And just one of the more, as always, Sting capped off his career doing some pretty risky and insane spots, but at the end of the day, they retained the titles and they retired. Sting and Darby Allin retired as AEW World Tag Team Champion. So,
Yep.
which culminated in a tournament, but that's beside the point. I'm just saying, I just wanted to recognize that match because it was Sting's retirement match.
And
Probably the way he wanted to end his career, not the way he ended it in the other place.
and good on Tony Khan for making sure Sting never got a loss.
That is true. That is true. He never actually did get a loss. You would have thought he would have gone out on a loss, but he didn't.
Yeah. Well, Sting didn't want to win a belt either, and Tony twisted his arm on that one. And right. I'm sure he wanted to get pinned in this match, but Tony twisted his arm on that one as well. So, because Sting is an old school guy, you know he would want to lose this match. But
right.
I guess the argument is the Young Bucks don't really need it. So it's cool to just let Sting go out on top. And yeah, that is a great honorable mention. That again, if there wasn't so many good wrestling matches throughout the year, probably would have made anybody's list. So yeah, hell of a year in wrestling for all companies. And I know that like people probably will look at like my list in particular and not see a lot of WWE matches. That's because the emphasis on story and not so I get that story is important, and when it does feel like when you feel it, that's when it should matter, and I get why that's why you had Cody and Roman as your number one. I care more about telling the story in the ring, and that's probably why I don't have too many WWE matches. The Hell in the Cell that I did include was all brutality and story, so it I guess it's subjective, but I like what I like.
Nope, can't argue with that.
So, yeah. So it's up to you. Do you want to quickly go through wrestlers of the year and not spend too much time, or do you want to do another episode on that?
We can quickly go through. I really have to go in about 10 minutes. So,
all right. So, again, for the instead of going and emphasizing everybody to a longer extent, I'll just go through my list of people, and we'll throw in a little, why later on. So on the men's side, my number 5 is Cody Rhodes, pretty much for everything that we discussed earlier. Um, Finishing the story, all of that, becoming the face of WWE, all of that. Cody absolutely deserves to be on the list. My number 4 is Drew McIntyre for everything that he did to make everything that he was doing feel important. Everything that he did for emphasizing how important this is to him and his character. And again, we talked about this a lot. When a heel is right, it's the best, because how am I going to disagree with that? And he's doing everything right. Everything he's saying is right. Everything he's doing is right. He just happens to be a heel while doing it. So people are supposed to hate him. But I don't. I love Drew and always will. Number 3 is Bryan Danielson. Probably would have been higher. But just everything that we talked about, the matches that he had all year leading to his retirement, the importance of all of his matches had that importance on them because we knew that it was going to be the ultimate end. And every single night he would just go out there and kill it, have these amazing matches, whether it was in New Japan, in AEW, in Mexico. I think other matches that we didn't really talk about, like the match he had with Hechicero, really put people on the put Hechicero on people's radar. I think Bryan Danielson has a lot to do with that. And yeah, the guy is just the best. He's easily one of my favorite wrestlers ever. So he had to be on my list for this year solely because of how it helped wrestling as a whole, what it meant, that we knew it was coming to an end, made people care. And yeah, love Bryan Danielson. My number 2 is Swerve Strickland. And for again, pretty much for everything that we discussed earlier, this was a perfect example of a rise of a star to the point where he became the world champion, made all of his matches that he had subsequently after becoming the champion feel more and more important, and solidifying himself as a top star in AEW to the point where he is undeniable now. He is one of the faces of this company. He is a main eventer. He is a huge star in wrestling to the point where it's branching out to hip hop and branching out to getting all these other names involved that you wouldn't normally see in wrestling. Swerve is playing a big role in that, and he solidified all of that this year. And of course, my number 1 is Will Ospreay, again, for everything that we've discussed previously. He cares about wrestling. He cares about people getting over when they need to get over, and he will do everything that he can to do so. But when he knows that he's going over, he kills it no matter what. And it's just not fair comparing other people to this man sometimes, because he just, like, if you go and say what you will about Dave Meltzer, you could agree with his opinions or not. The fact that this man has like 12 of the top matches of the year from the perspective of Dave Meltzer says a lot, because Dave Meltzer is a historian in wrestling who cares a lot about the wrestling side. And yeah, Will Ospreay, absolutely an amazing wrestler in every sense of the word, and I'm sure he's going to kill it again this coming year. And yeah, we'll see what happens with them. So those are my men. I'll go into my women after you give us your men.
Well, it's gonna be a quick list because you named off like 4 out of the 5 people that I have on my list already. Cody, Drew McIntyre. I'm interested in 2025 to see where Kevin Owens does with this thing because he's doing the exact same thing Drew's doing.
Yeah.
He is a heel, but the things he's saying is very true. I put Swerve and Will Ospreay in there, obviously. But the one person I added was Gunter because
Okay.
he came off WrestleMania, the longest reigning Intercontinental Champion in history. Finally, somebody managed to do it, and then he won the King of the Ring that year, which actually had some significance. This time, which led him to get a title shot at SummerSlam for the World Heavyweight Championship, which he did win. The only blemish lately was him losing to Cody at that weird crown jewel championship that is never going to leave Saudi Arabia. Other than that, he's still world heavyweight champion. He's still winning. Hard
Yeah.
to figure out what his next challengers are. I guess is probably the one reason why I would put him just at a
Yeah.
number 5 at this point.
I will add that I hated the direction his character went after that Cody loss.
You mean the whole
So
self-confidence, questioning
yeah.
himself, not sure when? Okay, because
Yes.
that was sort of odd. It was
Yep.
a bit out of character. I'm not sure. I don't know how they would ever put him as a baby face. It would have to be somebody would just be extremely hated at this point, like Xavier Woods. At first, I thought Dominic Mysterio would be someone like that, but it looks like Dominic might be coming babyface in comparison to some other people. But
Mhm.
yeah, that was all my men of the year apparently.
All right.
Pretty much the
So
same as yours. Yeah.
yeah. All right. On the women's side, my number 5 is Io Sky. Started off the year as the champion, had a great run with the belt, had that storyline with Bailey and we didn't mention that match at WrestleMania either. That's another honorable mention. But Io Sky absolutely kills it in the ring every time she gets in there. Every time she goes to another level, no matter what. We just saw this on the past Raw that we're recording this in the tournament match that she had with Lyra for the Intercontinental title. She wasn't even supposed to be in the tournament. She was replacing Kyrie, and she went out there, and her and Lyra had a hell of a match on Raw. One of the best matches I've seen on Raw in a long time. And we talked about the Utami match. Io Sky is a star in wrestling, and of course, she goes out of her way whenever she's in like these big matches. She like War Games. She goes out of her way to make people remember something from those matches, no matter what. She is one of the best. My number 4 is Jordynne Grace. We talked about pretty much everything that she's been through in the past couple of years, the evolution of her character, the evolution of her ability in the ring. She's still very young to comparatively, and yeah, she's gonna keep getting better, and she's gonna be in WWE at some point, and continue to kill it. And as I mentioned, we're gonna get so many matches that we want to see with her. We want to see her against Rhea Ripley. We want to see her against Bianca Belair. We want to see her against Charlotte. We want to see her against Becky eventually. These are all matches that we're going to get to see at some point when she goes to WWE, and that's going to be crazy because she's going to kill it. And I love Jordynne Grace. I've always loved Jordynne Grace. I think that 2025 is going to be a hell of a year for her, but I thought her 2024 was great. Every match that I would see her in, great. My number 3 is Mariah May. Again, for everything that we kind of spoke about, taking this role that she was given from day one in AEW and turning it into this long-term storyline where it was built up and took all this time to get to that turn when she finally earned her shot at the title, and using that and emphasizing her using Toni Storm to get there. All of this stuff just perfectly done by Mariah May, who is very young in her wrestling career, and just doing it perfectly. She's going to keep getting better. She's going to keep improving, and she's having great matches as the champion. She hasn't had great stories as the champion. That's something we need to work on, but she's going to continue to get better. And when we get to I'm curious to see what's next for her when she loses the belt, because we are pretty aware she's probably going to lose it to Tony at some point. So what do they do next? She's going to keep evolving, and just everything that she's done this past year is enough for me to say why she deserves to be recognized as one of the best. My number 2 is Mercedes Moné. Again, a lot of the stuff we mentioned earlier, she has a lot of passion for this. Every time she goes out there, she kills it in the ring. She gets emotional when she has those great matches, like the one she just had with Stephanie, like the Hazuki match, like the one, not Stephanie, Chris Statlander, but the Stephanie match also. Whenever she has these great matches, you can tell the reason her passion is evident. When she has these matches, she kills it in every sense of the word: character work, wrestling, everything. And it's going to keep getting better. And there's going to be matches that we haven't seen yet that she's going to have at some point, and just continue to build this. And yes, her star power is all due to WWE, and that's great. But she's using that to become one of the bigger stars in all of wrestling because of it. And I just love watching her work. And I thought that every match that she had this past year, like, yes, there was some questionable ones that people didn't thought were going to be better, but the ones that were really good were really good. And you can't say that about a lot of people. So then my number 1 is Toni Storm. Again, absolutely just everything that Toni Storm did as the timeless character, from all of her work as a character, and using that in the ring to solidify her championship run, and solidify that championship run, because obviously she had others already. But yeah, Toni Storm was on another level. Everything she does, she just works. She works harder than anybody in the women's division, I think, to get people to care about that stuff. When Timeless Toni Storm first came around, I mean, I loved it from day one, but it took a while for people to get on board with that. And when they finally did, it was like, oh, this is the best thing that Toni Storm has ever done, ever. And now it's gone, and people want it back. But I think it's good that it's gone, because you don't want it to go stale. So I like that she's back to her original character, and I want to see how she's going to turn that into something incredible. And yeah, I can't. Toni Storm, absolutely just one of the best in the world. So those are my top 5 women of the year.
Okay, so my top 5 of the women of the year, I think some of mine will overlap with yours. Number 5, I picked Liv Morgan. I think that I mean, it's almost by happenstance that she came up with the women's world title. I mean, Rhea got injured. She didn't end up with the title immediately, but she went through and beat Becky Lynch, I think, which is a huge accomplishment. Since then, she's managed to retain the title against Rhea at SummerSlam, which I think was significant. Taking the Dirty Dom away from her, and then getting Raquel back was, I think, a bonus for Liv as well. I'm not saying these are things that in terms of like wrestling was made her wrestler of the year, but it's just like the way that she managed to keep the title going into by next Monday as of this recording is very significant. So she was really one of the women of the year in terms of WWE. Another woman of the year, I think, in WWE would be Roxanne Perez. Since winning the NXT Women's title in around April, she's managed to retain it. I mean, she beat everybody, and she beat people outside of the companies like Jordan Grace. which I think was very significant. But she's turned back almost pretty much every challenger that she's faced, including Julia. And when Julia first showed up, so I think that was significant. Speaking of Jordan Gray, she's my number three, just because she's had one very significant knockout championship run this past year. Number two, Mercedes Monet, of course, since coming back from injury, becoming TBS champion, as well as picking up the Strong Women's Championship. And yeah, so, as we've seen, as you mentioned, some of her matches are just some of the most impactful, significant, and she really pours it out and just leaves it all in the ring. And my number one is actually Tony Storm, and yeah, I think Tony Storm, she did such an innovative character that was just something beyond what we were very much used to. And other than her dropping the AEW Women's World Title, she's had one of the most significant runs in wrestling that we've seen in a long time for a female wrestler. So congrats, and that's my top 5 women of the year.
All right. Well, I think 2024 had a lot of great stuff, and I think we're going to see a lot more of that in 2025. We're going to see what's going to happen with this Netflix era for WWE, this Max era for AEW. Both shows are going to be on streaming now. And SmackDown will remain on USA, but I'm hoping
if you're in Canada, I think they're all on Netflix or somehow. So
well, that's nice.
Yeah.
So I'm
international
hoping
audiences.
my prime hope for all of this is that ratings talk will completely go away. Completely. Stop with the ratings talk. Because
and
they're not going to matter now.
I think also stop with the all the seats are empty talk, because it's like it's very misleading, because frankly sometimes that stuff is either taken before the show starts or after everyone's left. It's like what do you believe, right? And it's like we're in an age where like things you see online are not necessarily true, and you have to be vigilant of what is real and what is not real out there.
Yeah. So I think we're all very excited for everything going on in the world of wrestling right now, and hope that 2025 is just as full of great stuff as 2024 was.
And that's a great way to end this pod. Remember to check out our link tree for all our links and how to find all of us. And please, in 2025, stay safe, stay entertained, and just watch what you love, everybody. Have a good night.